we'll have a great time. So
Okay.
thank you guys for being with us today on Tactical Scrubs. I'm really excited to be here with my good friend David LaRose. I met him at the Houston chapter meeting. What was that, last month, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and we had a really good time just chatting and sharing stories. And I think you've got some valuable information that people will want to hear and will want to know. So tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of, I guess, one of your favorite things about healthcare security, and then one thing you don't like about healthcare security industry.
So you want a little bit about myself first?
Yeah, or whatever, whatever you
Okay.
feel like doing.
Well, I was born a long, long time ago in a land far, far away. uh,
For that
uh,
long. Okay.
yeah. No, originally I'm from Colorado, and I did my initial career in law enforcement in Colorado, and then I got into healthcare, and that's where I realized the consistency within what I'll call service industry. Your public servants, and truly the profound effect it has to be a humanitarian, because I look at healthcare
Mm,
as a humanitarian industry, right? I mean, we're there to care for people, take care of people. And in law enforcement, that should be the fundamental principle in any police officer's mind,
right.
is you're there for the people in the community. So I was really lucky to be able to transition then when I careered out of law enforcement into healthcare. And
What made you make that transition, or was it just a job that was offered to you, or?
it goes back to the old networking, just always associating with people that you respect and admire, and someone taught me a long time ago, don't ever walk past an open door without looking inside.
Mm,
And so I met some folks, and ended up speaking with an industry expert. Everybody knows Tony York, and
right.
went to work for Hospital Shared Services. And Tony gave me my start in healthcare.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I developed from there, and then promoted up through the opportunities. Did some time at Memorial Hermann, then went over to Lakeland Regional, and then to Lee Health, where I was in different director roles,
That's in
and
Florida,
now
right?
I have a. I'm sorry.
Lee Health in Florida.
Yes, yeah, hmm,
I
yep.
know
I
the
left.
head of like the ACLS, CPR, all the heart stuff is Susan Davis, and she has now her own company called Heart Code, but she was from Lee and she runs their education department.
Yeah, yeah. I've just had some remarkable opportunities to really learn from the best, and mentor under the best. And so every time I moved, it was for greater opportunity.
Mm,
And I've always embraced that professional challenge, step up. And
right.
so I Florida with Lakeland Regional, phenomenal system. I mean, outstanding. I had a great, run there. I was their director of public safety, and I don't remember all the hats I wore, but it was management, preparedness, parking, all the necessary. Parking's a necessary evil, so I got to learn all that stuff. And then with Lee Health, and then again opportunity, and I was asked to come on board, which is today Everon, and I moved from being one of their principal consultants on their eSurge team to now today I am the director of healthcare business development.
Okay.
So
And
that's
what kind of solutions does Everon offer, just for like the nurses and the other people out there that are listening that aren't familiar with Everon?
so Everon is a full service integrator. We provide in the healthcare side basically every form of technology or patient care safety technology that you can think of. Whether if you're looking at the standard, your traditional access control, VMS, patient visitor or visitor management, to patient monitoring, nurse communications, anything that's going to do with mitigating risks, slip and falls, those kind of technologies. Um, Workplace violence. So again, are you looking for weapons detection, or are you looking for a better screening process? It's really just a very robust portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's helped me is coming from the end user
Right.
and so
Right.
many years in healthcare. If you were to call me on the mother baby unit or the ED and say we're having these issues, I can look at, then can I bring a solution to help mitigate and help you there. So
Yeah, I think a lot of the tech companies are now looking towards people that at least have clinical or hospital experience to kind of help them drive their innovation and drive their marketing and branding, because they realize that it's becoming I think people are always like, oh, the violence is increasing, the violence is increasing. And I think it is to some point, but I also think it's just always been there. We just haven't had as much of the stressors from the systems contributing to the patients, and then the incivility and just people having been cooped up for long and then let out, and clinicians are really no longer seen as that authority figure. And that's something that you and I talked about last time we talked was, what are some things that you can do to have presence when you're in a room or when you're taking care of a patient. And those don't have to be you being assertive and nasty. It can be very much identifying those behavioral anomalies and those skills that you guys have very strongly from your experience.
Well, I think Mel, you've touched it, correctly in the fact that it's not that it's the right piece of technology. It's not that it's the silver bullet to everything. I think it's having the right people doing the right things for the right reasons for the right outcomes.
Right.
You can step into a room with a person who's behavioral challenged, and you can immediately escalate it, or you can use your emotional intelligence, and you can use your de-escalation skills, and you can use your humanity, right, and your empathy, and really try to get to understand what this person's going through.
Right.
And and many years ago in my career, we were taught that you can create the hostility or you can help resolve the hostility. And
That's a
so I
good way
think
of putting it.
moving from a police officer, doing with what we would in society with that type of disobedience or issues, social issues, into healthcare, you just have to transition the fact that you're not the authoritarian who's going to enforce something. You're there to be the person who's trying to collaborate a solution, right? Trying to
Right.
empathize them into cooperation.
I always
And
say we're here to assist you in your compliance today.
right. And in my old days, I used to say, look, there's three ways this can happen. You know, and I don't need to elaborate on those because everybody understands law enforcement knows there's three ways something's going to happen. But in healthcare, it's just really it's putting yourself in that person's position. I find it really sometimes just hard to believe when we read the headlines how a healthcare provider, a patient care provider, right, somebody who even touches the patient can lose their emotional intelligence, can lose their temperament because they're dealing with somebody in a crisis. Um, they're not going to be stable. They're going to give you every emotion that you don't want, right? I
Right.
mean, no one goes to a hospital to have a good time. I've heard that from many of the people you've interviewed. Most people go there for there's a problem.
Right.
The ones that leave in a good time are having, children.
I
But
think there's like a very strong disconnect from nursing education too. We have this concept
mhm.
that we're going
Well,
to
and
go
and I don't want to come across.
into the hospital. Mm-mm.
Sorry,
You there? Or the
yep, I lost you
internet's
for a little
just
bit. Okay, I, I'm going to pick up on what you said. I don't want to ever come across as judgmental, but I think what happens is a lot of times the health systems have put the clinical training that is not medical on the backside. So in
right.
other words, the learning the de-escalation, learning more of the communications, the soft skills, right? I was often told sometimes that even as a former law enforcement and into my director roles, could I come in a little nicer, a little softer, a little kinder, a little gentler? And I remember this supervisor telling me that the VP I was working for, and I really looked at her and she said, "You don't understand, do you?" And I go, "No, because I'm a nice guy. I didn't say anything wrong. I was collaborative. Whatever, whatever." And I found myself going, "I better be quiet. This is a learning opportunity." And that's another problem, right? We're trying to be quiet and
I
learn.
like that.
And she said, "No, it's just that now you need to learn that more of that subtle approach, that more of that take a deep breath on your end and let them say what they need to say." Where
Yeah.
I was looking to solve their problem, and it was no, just be quiet. Just,
Yeah, I think
give
a
them.
lot of times in healthcare, nurses are coming in and they've got this idea that they're going to help people and they're going to be wonderful and
Mhm,
nurses are heroes. And at home at the family dinner table, oh, my daughter's going to be a nurse. She's going to help people and everyone's so nice. And then you get there and the patients are really sick, and they're very addicted to different types of
mhm.
medications. And a lot of them have substance abuse disorders. A lot of them, because we don't have enough mental health resources in this country, they're really just hanging out for those purposes. So I think that a lot of times they aren't given the true picture. And because they're really afraid to tell nurses this, because we need so many nurses, they don't want them to realize that early. But I said, it's not about that. If you approach it from this approach, like I can have tactical empathy, I can be caring, and they need me there. They need new nurses, they need compassionate nurses. But how can I do it and still maintain my authority figure? And I think that's where the collaboration I've learned from you all, from the IAHSS, from the EP guys that I've worked with, Michael Hovelbin, the rest of my team, they have taught me how to do that subtle, I know I could kill you right now, but we're gonna have a good conversation type of thing. And I
Right.
think that nurses don't have any type of training about that, so they don't feel empowered. If you know when you go in the room that you know where your patient's hands are, and you know that if X, Y, and Z happens, I'm prepared to do, one, two, three. That goes a long way in me being able to actually provide safe and effective care with the right amount of speed. That's the problem. We don't have the time to sit there and be like, well, tell me about your childhood trauma so I can help you
Mhm.
deal with taking your medication. It has to be a
Right.
fast approach, but an effective one. And that's what separates healthcare security to me from any other type of security.
Well, I think everything you said is absolutely within the paradigm as you consider what's affecting healthcare. But a lot of it goes back to I also think about hiring the right people for the right reasons, right? For the right outcomes. It's providing them the necessary tools. Um, I know we always have to bring on an employee, and we're investing in the employee, and we try to tell them how much we spent on them in healthcare just to get them in front of the patient. But really, why don't you tell them about how you're investing in them to make them successful,
Yeah.
not because you cost us this much to onboard. I'm investing as your CEO or your CNO. I'm investing this amount of money in Mel because she has the emotional intelligence and the compassion and the humanity to be a caring, providing healthcare worker, right? But I need to give you these tools and not make you feel like it was a double standard. And part
I
of
feel
that
like
training, I
that's a lot
always
of
think
the
is
training out there. You just hit it. A lot of the training feels like patronizing. Like, what could you have
yes,
done differently in this
right,
situation? Like, I
right.
want to help people. Like, I'm not going to work trying to be a bitch. Like, that's not what I do. But if you put me in a really stressed system and I don't have the skills to deal with my own emotions or space
Hmm.
to do that, then you're going to see the end result. And now we're here at the end result. So trying to fix things, like I just had a discussion with someone on LinkedIn today. They're like, well, there's not enough staffing, because we were talking about that hospital in
Oh,
Seattle
Seattle.
Children's.
Hmm.
And they were talking about how, well, they need more staff. I'm like, they can't just procure staff. Like, if they could do that, they would be doing that. Like, they're not dumb. It's a
Hmm.
matter of the training that they need. And these patients are pediatric patients. So you've got a whole different spectrum
Right. I
that you
mean,
need to understand.
you're dealing with children that haven't even completely emotionally developed or don't understand the a value system of respect and appreciation and culture and all that. So, what I was going to add to your comments is that's where I think it's also one of the things I always felt was necessary is I trained my security officers the same way I would train a clinical provider, a nurse, or a physician. So when you
Yes.
came to my workplace violence training, which you and I had discussed, the programs I had helped write and the ones you've done, um, not to treat them differently, because the officer needs to be as in control with their emotions as the nurse does, but then they both need to be as competent and confident to physically engage as a team.
Yeah.
And I always looked at it as, if you can get in there and be self-aware of your surroundings, you have your conscious thoughts going on, what I need to do, how do I engage with this patient? And if they're violent, then you've already identified all those characteristics, you've already looked at all the triggering events, and you bring in the necessary, resources, right? But if you want to go in there as the one warrior and you said something wrong and you escalated it, at the debriefing, you got to take ownership of that.
Right.
And
And I think a
so,
lot of times they don't even realize what they did was wrong because you're watching if I watch an older nurse, taller male deal with a patient, it's going to be way different than my approach as 4'11"
mhm,
female, 120 pounds soaking wet. Like I'm not going to have the same type of interaction with that gentleman, if it's a gentleman, that my colleague would have. And then
mhm.
I think there's something to be said for training people on having a way to approach people when I'm stressed and I'm emotional and I'm thinking about all the other things I have to do for my other 6 patients. Is there a standardized approach, just like CPR? You go in the room and someone's dead. What do? We start doing compressions and you yell for help. Like it should be the
Mhm.
same type of systemized training. And then you build on that. You build on those core skills.
Yes, and not only the training, but then your technologies, right? I think everything goes together. I think
Yes.
having the right resources, the right technology solutions, the right mindset is that perfect, you know, um,
And
triangle that's going to be
spending
the
$1
solution.
million on training, you don't
Hmm.
have $1 million for a weapons detection system. So like,
Hmm.
what is the thing that we have to give up? And that's where I was hearing from CEOs and directors, I have to give up one thing. We can try that next year. And I'm like, no, you have to do it all together. And then you
Right.
have to make it a recruitment and retention
Hmm.
event. Like,
And it's partnering, right? It's partnering with the right resources, stakeholders at the health facility. Excuse me, my best stakeholder partners were the director of the emergency departments, were the directors of the women and children's pavilions or the mother and baby units. It was the behavioral health directors because we had the same consistent needs, but together we were more collaborative in bringing our solutions.
right.
And so I think a lot of times people just don't know what path to go down, how they go in and ask for, whether if it's training or if it's a technology resource, or they come in together as a cohesive team and they put a very good presentation together and they say, if you will take care of this, we can now deliver better patient quality outcomes, right? We can try to improve our patient care metrics. We can try to get whatever score they want on, if it's leapfrog
Right.
or something else, or their HCAPS, or, hey, we're up for, why does everybody panic? I always think it was, everybody panics when all of a sudden they're up for their assessment, right?
Isn't it
Oh, Joint
hilarious?
Commission's coming. Yeah, Joint Commission's coming. Oh, DMV's coming. And, you should already be running 100%. You should already be running at your best every day. The staff
When
that are
I was
leading
a
in
DON,
great,
that's what I used
yeah,
to say. I was like, why are you? I don't panic. In my unit, we never panicked because we were ready.
right.
I was ready.
It's
And that
control,
is hard.
control chaos.
It's hard to maintain that level of readiness,
Hmm.
all the time. But that's quality. That's what Joint Commission is trying to do, not rush around in your survey window and fix things. And I
Right,
think
right.
that because we've got so many tasks on people's plate, like you were saying in the beginning, you were saying you were doing, operations, you were doing threat management, you were doing, regular workplace violence. Like you're supposed to do all of that together
Hmm.
in one day. Like that is
Right.
a lot to handle. And I think security, from what I've seen from clinical, like I just talked to two very, very like influential nurses, and they didn't even know what the IAHSS was.
Yeah.
And
And,
that's a
and I think that it is a problem because it goes back on the ownership of, I think, of a lot of different process, right? I mean, um, I know being with IHSS for well over almost 20 years and a past president, it, it's getting the message out there. It's trying to share the values, and that should be a mission that the organization never loses. It's also, though, um, I think on the clinical side, them not taking advantage sometimes of the experts that they've hired into certain roles. So if you
yes.
brought me in as your director of public safety and emergency preparedness and parking and all this other stuff, and I have a CHPA or I have a CPP and all this other stuff, then you should be coming to me and asking, what are the opportunities you can bring? What are the solutions? That's why we hired you. So, I always go back to having the right people doing the right things for the right reasons, for the right outcomes.
Right. I mean,
And
if
that's
we're
how I run my right. And that's how
CEO,
I run my team today. Hmm.
right, as CEO, if I'm the smartest person at the table, I'm at the wrong table. This is the wrong
Hmm.
table for me. I have made it an effort to surround myself with the best people that I could find because that's
Right.
who I knew was going to create the best solution. And I
Right.
think that's what organizations kind of get stuck in, that silo. That hospital, I think it was the same Seattle Children's, they just enacted like a vote of incompetence in their CEO. So
Which
like,
is unfortunate.
yeah, because it's
Mhm.
like he probably does have really good experience and expertise, but it's like you're trying to manage this situation.
Mhm.
And if you don't know what's out there and you don't know what's available, how do you get to that? And I think that's one of the beneficial portions of the IAHSS is that you guys have a strong network, you're sharing information. I've had gentlemen
Mhm.
just pick up the phone and call me and be like, what do you think about a zero tolerance policy? And I'm like, that's ridiculous. Like, that's stupid. And they're
Right.
like, the security director was like, that's what I was thinking, Mel, but no one will listen to me because the hospital next
Mhm.
door did it. I'm like, I will write you a letter of support. I will send you some
Mhm.
data. Like, what do you
Right.
need? I will support you, you
Yeah, but a
know?
wrong message is still going to be a wrong message, right? It doesn't matter how many times you want to color it, change the name, or whatever. And again, I think it always goes back to getting away from that me syndrome and the I syndrome. It's about us, and it's
Right.
about how can we be better at what we do. And so, I really, whenever I was either interviewing for the position or I was, fortunate to be awarded the position, I really tried to engage not only with my team but within those stakeholders because I don't have to know everything about everything. I mean,
Who did you find to be like most valuable other than clinical?
most valuable other than clinical.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, just don't overlook your own team. Like my team came from all vast backgrounds, right? So hiring public safety or security officers today doesn't mean they were former law enforcement. That's a difficult one for a lot of law enforcement to transition to. Doesn't mean they were former military. It meant they may have been coming from the hospitality system where they came, from working for, say, a large hotel chain where they worked the front desk forever, but they had great communication skills. Or they happen to be a school teacher who's tired of teaching school and now wants to, and it's like, well, you want to be a security officer? Well, they just had a passion for wanting to help.
Yeah.
Look at the transporters. You know where you get some great
I
talent.
love
Is-
transporters.
I
Oh
know that.
gosh. When I worked in Baltimore City, I'll tell you this story. I was in Baltimore City and I was in the CVICU, and at Hopkins, like if one of the CTs is closed, you have to go underground to the other one. There's several there, but it's like a 15-minute walk. Okay. And I had this really sick patient and we're rolling, and we just had the new LaRose pumps get updated. So I have a patient on like critical medications to keep them alive. And they had like a fresh chest. So you couldn't do CPR, like it was a thing. And we're rolling and we go over the elevator and the pumps turn off, all of them. And I'm like, oh my God. And the transporters are like, I'm ready. They're these big, big inner city black dudes. And like, I was running to keep up with them. I'm like, slow down. They're like, we're ready. I'm like, don't touch his chest. And they're like, what do you mean? What do we do? I'm like, I don't know. And I remember being like a brand new nurse and me and them together. And they were like, we got you, Mel, and they
Yeah.
flew down the hallway to the ICU when we were finished. And they were just wonderful, but they were always great security. I mean, you
Mhm.
have one of those guys and they know the hospital really well. And
Oh yeah.
unfortunately, that's one of the areas where we see a lot of violence when they're transporting the patient by themselves and they
Mhm.
get themselves in an elevator or something.
Mhm.
So that's one of the people that we pull in when we do our training. We believe that everybody that's in front of a patient should have basic training. It shouldn't be a click through PowerPoint either. And that's the thing that they're meeting the Joint Commission requirement by doing a little video safety training. But like that Joint Commission and OSHA and all those organizations have to come behind us. I'm starting this GC. Did I tell you? I'm starting a general contracting company.
Oh
So
yeah, you did. Yeah.
yeah, my dad's like was the senior VP for Wadding Turner for a really long time, and I watched him build iconic buildings in Baltimore. And my significant other has a electrical contracting company. So he was like, we could do a lot of entrance upgrades and lighting for parking lots and security cameras and blah blah blah. And so when we have been doing a little bit of threat assessment and stuff, I'm like, what do you think about this entryway? He's like, oh, you could put MetroSense or whatever in the wall and like it would be so cool. And I'm like, you've got so many good ideas. I was like, we should start a GC. So we did. And so I'm really excited because it's like now we're finding the spaces where
Mhm.
organizations need the help. So if you had a contractor that said, I know a security guy, I can call
Mhm.
Everon, I can call
Mhm.
David from Everon and we can plan out your building with the security principles in the beginning, just like that New Hampshire hospital, they had just made upgrades. They closed it in. It was formerly open, like all the way open. There was like a cafeteria, and they put walls up and bulletproof glass. So that security officer, even though he really should have been armed if you have a weapons detection system, because he probably would have lived, but he could keep that person in there and protect. I mean, hundreds of people would have died. So now I just saw an article this morning about New Hampshire, like mandating the other 17 state hospitals to have upgrades. So it's an opportunity, but it's also really needed. We need to start looking at access control and perimeter control for these incidents.
Well, I think you almost triggered my brain to go to 15 different things just fired, and I maxed out at 16. So,
That's good.
what I was thinking is, so healthcare always wants to be that that welcoming, right? They want to look like an atrium to you walk into the Hyatt Grand somewhere, and I can't secure that. I used to look over the atrium. I'd look over the atrium and go, "You got to be kidding me," right? But that's what they visualize.
We're
And
here on the
so,
Aloha deck, and
yeah,
figure it
I
out.
know, but and they want valet parking to come right up to the front door, and they want to be able to, there are no barriers, no nothing, whatever. But I think what you triggered on was I don't ever want to Monday night quarterback anybody, and I don't ever want to have anybody go through someone else's unfortunate outcome again. But that's where you call upon the folks that have the talent, that have the resources, have the ability, and you say, okay, let us come together and put together these recommendations for you. Because we don't have to make it Fort Knox if it's not necessary. That's where all the, your pre-evaluate, when you come in and do your risk assessments and you do your pre-evaluation walks and your SEPTED designs and things like that. But you sit down and you talk about, who are your customers first? What's your clientele? What's your community? Because sure you want to keep your culture and your community standards, but it's not to be, it's like today, it's so hard to say the right things for the right reasons because people go, you can't use that word anymore.
Well, welcome to Scrubs, where we say whatever the hell we want because that's who I am. I'm like,
what I'm saying is, if you are in a crime notorious neighborhood and you have all of your just criminal stats and you have your map index and everything, and you're in a violent area, then we probably want to target harden you more than we would if you happen to be in some nice community area that's kind of in a 40 or 55 and plus retirement area. I mean, you have to look at all the data first, right? And that's where you call in those stakeholders and you say, well, Mel, you've worked here for 20 years. What's the worst thing you've ever encountered?
Yeah.
Oh, well, what's the most common things that you encounter? And you really have to do those assessments. And so that's where I pride myself if we're talking to another health system and they're having some issues. But a lot of times it's just what you thought was going to be the initial meeting never turned out to that initial presentation. It was more of a discussion. It was more of just coffee and conversation.
Well, if I was on an organization, I had someone like you on the other end, you're a wealth of, I would be asking you any question that I could think of, while I had your time and attention because you're just a wealth of information,
But, and it's not, I just have as I tell everybody, even when I was a commander on the street or to today, I just have um, the blessing to be the leader, but the talent's really within the team, right? So if I get to speak on the team's behalf, I accept the acclimates and the thank yous for the team.
Right.
Like you were saying before, I don't need to know everything about everything. I've experienced things, they've experienced things, but we come together as a cohesive team, we're pretty good.
Right.
And if we can sit down and have conversation, and I think that's where we get lost in these virtual meetings anymore. It's, hey, it's got to start at 101, and by then we're done at 159 because I got another thing to go to, and we can't talk. We can't sit there and have coffee and some of the best things I ever got resolved were having coffee and cookies and milk and cookies and stuff like that in a boardroom and talking about, okay, what had you bring me here today?
Yeah.
What is going on?
Yeah, I think that is missing because we're so busy now. The speed, the speed of which we're supposed to operate. And in executive protection, they do an advance, right? It's the same sort of like a threat assessment, but you're looking at moving targets. You're looking at, and I think that's the difference when I go out to an organization, the first day I'll do a threat assessment. I'll basically do I know what I know and I know what I don't know, David. So if
Right.
I need to call in somebody like Paul Sarnes to do a full threat assessment, then that's what we're doing. But
Right.
I'm going to go do an advance of the unit, talk to the nurses, look at the space, because then when I go back and look at policy and procedure, I may need to pull in the lawyer and, do some
Right.
significant adjustment. But I'm going to go and train based on your policy and procedure, and then the layout of the actual rooms and the hallways and the way that you deliver care. Because if I need to get out of Dodge and my room's set up like an L, how do I do that? And how do I train for that? And
Mm-hmm.
that's the part that makes tailored and clinical train. That has to be part of clinical training when nurses get there, because
Yeah.
they don't
Cookie
know
cutter doesn't work.
the room. You can
Yeah.
sit in
Cookie.
a classroom or watch a PowerPoint, but that's nothing when you're out there having an
Right.
emotional response to, oh my gosh, this is happening to me and I don't know what to do. So you have to
Mm-hmm.
really train and drill on that. And that's where security becomes really beneficial, because there are times when we're just sort of standing around watching this, challenging behavior patient. We're like, what are we doing? But those are times where security can come in and be like, all right, what would happen if the patient did this? Say that patient now decides to take that call bell and decide that it's going to be a weapon. What are you going to do? And that's an opportunity where security can really establish themselves as the professionals that they are, because they are. Like, if you talk to my co-founder, Dela Cruz, who does bedside security, but he also does EP, he's the one innovating, coming up with the solutions based on what he sees from the nurse. And there's been
Mm-hmm.
many times where he's had to go in the room and just by his presence demanding, changes the outcome of the situation, because he has presence as a male and someone that's trained to mitigate. A lot of times I need a break. I'm a female. 90% of nurses are females. We are emotional fucking creatures. And so for us to try and calm that shit down enough to be like, okay, I can handle Joe Blow over here who just masturbated to me, that's a real big
Well,
problem. You're expecting a lot from someone. And sometimes
no,
we
no.
need that male counterpart to kind of step in and be like, go have a cough, go chill yourself out, come back, and we'll deal with this in
Mm-hmm.
the standardized approach that we have learned to deal with it.
You always can take a professional timeout, right? There's no shame in anybody's game ever saying, I need to step aside. Because you know how I survived being married for 30 years? I know when to step aside.
Well, and you're married
So,
to she's a nurse, right?
no, she's a former law enforcement, but she was in a healthcare setting.
Okay, that's where you met her. I was like, okay, but see,
Yeah, yeah,
she's former
yeah.
law.
See,
She can handle it. She can handle
yeah,
you
I know.
together.
But I also know when to just walk away. So, I need time out. But no,
Sit.
and you were talking about other things too, like where other valuable people to engage with, and you were just talking about that's why I always try to learn from a lot of the facility people. They've been there for a long time, all the ins and outs. They know all the things that were done in the past that didn't work, the things that they would recommend. Your risk management, they have
Mhm.
all the data. They know where the checks are being written because somebody seems to constantly slip and fall outside of this one elevator,
Yeah.
or why is there always this one nurse being assaulted in this one area? So,
Well, it might
you
be
can
because
gather,
you're a professional instigator. Because I am a
right?
recovering professional instigator. I
Are
was
you
just,
recovering?
you want me to, I'll kill you, make it look like an accident kind of thing. Okay. I was that. This is proof that the saltiest ICU nurse out there can be reformed into a tactical empathy provider.
So you walk into the room and you go, "Hi, I'm Mel. I'm here to help you. Now shut up and do what I tell you to do."
We're getting up out of bed today. He's like, but I just had
No,
chest.
because
I don't care. No.
that's when the person goes, "I think I'm better. I'm gonna go home."
Exactly. They're like, I'm gonna get up and walk out of here. I'll carry
I'm
my
glad
own
to help you.
check.
Don't forget our survey. Do our survey, and we get all 5 stars.
My nurse was amazing because she told me to write this. Not she was gonna find me. No.
I think her name was Attila the Hun.
That's right. No, but
So,
I think there's a lot to be said. I always tell nurses this, and maybe I would love to hear your opinion about this. If you can't authoritatively they always say set limits. Your patient doesn't care about limits. Jeff Cooper says that a criminal does not fear the judge, jury, or the jail cell, right? They're going to do what they want to do. So what you have to do is figure out how you can use your nursing skills. For instance, I had a patient that was constantly cussing at me while we were trying to do a med pass. She's like, "You're a bitch, you're a blah, blah, blah." And all I did was go through the 5 rights of medication. Is your name Mary? What's your birthday? And I just stayed very steady and ignored it. I was like, I'm ready to throw hands at this lady. But guess what? I'm a professional nurse and I'm going to stick to my professionalism. And I did not engage with anything else that she said. And you know what? She gave up because guess what? It's like a toddler, they're either going to continue and elevate to where they are throwing things and they become violent, or they're going to back off because they know that they can't move you from your job.
Well,
and all I did was my
she's
job.
trying to bait you.
Right. And
She's
all I
trying
did
to bait
was my
you.
job. I didn't do any physical techniques. I didn't have to do any like high skilled negotiation. I just did my job to the best of my ability, and doing my best is always good enough. And I think if we can teach nurses, then teach security what the nurse's role is truly, and teach the nurse what security's role is, because that does change based on hospitals. They're not expecting, Captain whoever to jump in and wrestle the guy if that's not what Captain whoever can do. So we have to understand roles and responsibilities and then follow the policies that are in place and have those back us up. And if we need to modify policy, then we find somebody and find an expert to help us do that.
But I think you also, again, that's why I go back to the collaborative training. I shouldn't be training just security officers. There should be clinical staff in the same class. They should be partnered to work together. I always found that more beneficial too, because
when you show up,
well, if they show up, but again, then
you show up to the
you have to go back to you got to go back to accountability then, right? You don't make them think that training's not a negative and it's not a punishment. Sorry you had to come in on your normal day off, but this is a very important tool that we need to learn. And I lived it for all those years. You always had training on your day off. Well, that's just how it rotated. But at the end of the day, is if I'm partnering with Mel, and now Mel knows, hey, we kind of got to have a little collegiate time here in training. When we work together, we already kind of know each other, right? And it's not this stranger coming in and me telling you, why don't you step aside? I'll take this. It's maybe me walking in and you go, would you take that? Because I already know that you can.
And if you don't have a standard approach, when security walks up, they don't know where you're at. But if you can say, I'm in the red, I'm in orange, I'm in red, they know what protocol you're about to follow together. They know where you're at. If you're at the high, how can I help you stage, and your hands are up, and we know that nurse has identified some behavioral anomalies, and now they have to approach them with that type of tact. And so those keywords and those things that you're training together, it doesn't matter if you have a travel nurse and a brand new security officer that have never seen each other before, they can tell what stage of mitigation they're at based on the words and the way that they're directing to the patient, because you have a standard approach. Then after you've established the standard, we're all on the same page, we can go into our advanced mitigation skills, those time, if we have the time. But the problem that I'm seeing is everybody's running these BERT team responses, and they all stand in the hallway and just let the patient continue to do whatever they're doing. Because there's no actual
they're
approach.
waiting for they're waiting for the one person they know that will take control.
Right.
And that's unfortunate, because everybody should be able to step up and be a leader in those events of crisis, even if it's just delegating what you need, right? I may not be the first one through the door.
A lot of hospitals, when they do CPR, when there's a code, they have like the primary nurse does the history, the primary CNA starts CPR, the charge nurse will do medications. Like there is a systemized approach when we roll up to the room. So that's exactly what we teach, is a systemized approach in the beginning, so that we can all get to the same point faster to avoid the injury.
Sure. And I mean, you're making me think back to like teaching patient restraints. If it had to go to that level and there was a call for the restraints, then I always taught the medical staff is that, look, at security is here to help you. We will help you apply the restraints, but this is a medical process. So we'll help you apply them. But when we're done, you're in charge. So if there's anything happening along the way, speak up, right? You Just because we came in and we were the strength doesn't mean we're taking over your patient or your patient care.
And a lot
And
of new nurses don't know that.
that's where I always looked up at the clinical staff and said, are you okay with this? Is what you
God,
want? How do you want the patient turned? What do you
why?
need? You know,
David's here.
yeah,
See you later.
they're gone.
I have 6 more med passes to do. See you later. No.
Call us when you're done. Yeah. So, but again, it's always it's working together for the right outcome. And another thing that I always was a pet peeve of mine is that you didn't take the time to reinforce the positives with the team afterwards, right?
Oh my
So
gosh.
even if it's just a quick debriefing in the hallway, look, I just want to compliment all of you. From the time I got here, I watched you working in unison. There was good communication going on. Some of you that took some key roles, you did a great job. You know, great job. Whatever. And if I had anything that I wanted to work on or improve on, I may just grab somebody later on, walk through the hallway, and go, "Hey, next time, if I could just give you any friendly advice, don't wait so long," or something like that, right? But it was like reinforce that stuff, and we don't do that enough either.
And a lot of
I don't
times
even.
there's a culture shift now. Like I saw a
Mhm.
comment, someone was like, well, nurses don't want our opinion or support. They want it from their colleagues, kind of thing. And I'm like, no, we're very stressed out and we're very upset about the situation we're in. So we are gonna roll our eyes and be like, yeah, right, whatever. I hate that guy. But deep down inside, we appreciate it and we need it. And I think
Sure.
it's understanding. It's like when you talk to your salty, whatever sergeant or somebody in the police department that was always nasty, right? He was always really nasty to you, but he really did appreciate what you were saying. He just had that persona about him, right? That's how
Yeah,
you
and
approach
we.
a
Yeah.
nurse.
Yeah, I mean, we were going to be professional get-alongs, but we're not going to be friends outside, right? So,
Right.
but we have to learn to appreciate each other again for what we can do, and I think that goes a long way in healthcare. And again, I didn't look to make life difficult for anybody in the hospital system, but if I could make a better process and ensure a better safety outcome for one nurse, then it was worth it. So if somebody wanted to complain that today that became the employee-only entrance, and I'm sorry you had to walk around half of the building on the other side and you had to get out of your old habit, that's just it. Because now I think I made it safer for a lot of you, right? I mean, there are little things we did always along the way. But anytime you throw that change ball in there, what happened? They want to throw it back at you,
Right. Well,
So,
healthcare workers are the most resistant to change, and so
hmm
they are very difficult to navigate. But that's why if you have someone that has the experience in healthcare security or combination, they're really beneficial when you're implementing something new because there's a way to deliver it. Just like
hmm
that's marketing, right? That's branding. There's a way to deliver the product that you want to deliver and create the need. If they don't feel like they have a need for it, then they don't want it. But if they do have a need and you don't deliver, then now you've created this place of distrust within the
hmm
organization. And when you
right,
try and offer a solution and it isn't what they thought they needed, then you're now giving things that are not practical to them.
hmm
So you have
that's
to
why.
give them something that looks like something they've already seen.
Well, make it their idea, right?
Right.
Sometimes, I mean, again, I don't have to walk out and go, "Oh, I had all these ideas." I just go in there and go, "Hey, Mel, I thought you had a good idea the other day. Didn't you say this?" And yeah, I said that.
I
Okay,
did.
great. We'll call
Yeah.
it the Mel way now, right? But
Right.
it's just sometimes just knowing how to manage up or manage out. Um, I know this is easy to say when it's not a stressful situation happening, but it really is. It's just getting to learn how to best communicate within the organization.
Yeah.
And you do get that reputation, or you'll get a positive persona that people go, that's a good person, that's a good nurse, that's a good security officer, because they take the time to do what? To listen. And yes, they can engage. Don't cross her, wrong, right? But when she walks in, you can probably step back and give her some space because she's going to de-escalate it.
Yep.
Or hey, if David walks in, it's going to go to total crap. We better be ready to handle it.
And that's
So
where you're like, hey, David, the patient on the hall really needs some help with some medication.
right,
I got
right,
this.
right, yeah. No, and you got to be thick-skinned in healthcare, right? I mean, we all like the adrenaline. We all like the chaos. I always called it, again, it is controlled chaos. I've heard many of your folks on your pods talk about, that's why you get into healthcare because you like to change up all the time. You could be having the most quiet day, and all of a sudden, all the alarms and whistles and bells went off, and it's like, you got to be kidding me, or whatever's going to happen. But it's the folks that you have doing the jobs. It's taking care of your staff. It's taking care of ensuring we give them the right tools, the right technology. We give them the right procedures, and you support them. And so that's why, like I said, I told you, I always thank my team. Hey, things are going good. You guys are making it happen. Thank you. Or hey, things are going a little rough right now. We need to make some change ups. Let's all get together because I want to hear your opinions.
Right,
Right?
right.
Because you're the one experiencing it. Why do you have a behavioral health room right in the middle of an open ED hallway? Well, let's talk about maybe we need to restructure something. Or I know that's what.
We'll just keep him right here speaking, keep an eye on him.
Right.
And he can
Right in
keep
the
an eye
middle
on
of
all
the,
of us.
right in the middle of the waiting area with one
You're like,
door to be outside,
he's
and
like,
all they're
I'm
doing is running
eye
in.
on you. And I'm like, we
They're,
know.
they're running down. They're running down in their little yellow socks or whatever color socks you put on them, and their little gown, and they're back out in the main street again. It's like, oh, that didn't work, did it?
I love when
So,
they're like watching, and they're like, I used to have this one psych patient that came in all the time at a place that I worked, and he would stand in the hallway and he would write down all the blood pressures for the aides. He would be like, oh, 120/75. He'd be like, that person needs blood pressure medicine. And he knew what to do. He was like the intensivist by the end of his day. I was like, I would hire you. You want a job? But he would stand there and be like, a person with a red shirt just walked by 20 minutes ago. And I'm like, okay, thank you. Thank you.
we need to calm down a little bit.
He would
But hey,
stand right on the edge because we're like, you cannot come out of the room. He's like, okay. So we would wheel everything over to the edge of the room and he would sit there and he would watch everything.
but again, that was your way of calming him and controlling him and playing to his positive side, right?
Yes.
Because we all had the repeat patients, the frequent flyers that you knew what their triggering events were, and if you went in and just gave them the trigger, boom, there it goes. So
And I think
you
there's
learn
something
how.
to be said for when you get report on that patient, on the top of your report sheet, it says behavioral triggers are, and you
Right,
list them. And
right.
nobody's doing that. Like how that's not hard. And then security rounding. LaRose tells me all the time, the most beneficial thing that he does is round frequently and often. People are like, you're here again? He's like, yeah, but I'm here if you need me. And they
Right.
always call him. They're like, LaRose, we need you, we need you. And he catches things before it becomes a problem.
That's like directors. It's not my philosophy or practice, but I did not sit behind my desk in my nice safe office 8-hour shifts. If I could get out of my office 7.5 hours of those 8 hours, I was walking the floors,
Me
right?
too.
Because again, I wanted to walk by and have you see me on your floor, but I'm the director, and you're going, "Wow, the director's walking the floor." And who responded to the call for assistance? The director did, because I'm no different. I'm part of the team, and if I can see it and experience it, maybe I can help make it better.
I
And
think
so,
there's a lot of opportunity for coaching. I love when I'm on
mhm,
location and there's like a BERT response called. I just stand there and I watch. And I'm like, let me see how this goes. And they're like, well, what do you think, Mel? I'm like, no, I want you guys to do this like I'm not even here. And then I
mhm.
may coach a nurse or coach somebody, why don't you try this? And then they're like, oh, that's a great idea. But you have to do it. Like there is no excuse for not drilling these scenarios.
Well, there's no better opportunity than experiencing it in real time, right? Now, if you have the safeguards or Mel's there, she can do a change up immediately if necessary. But if you let it play out and everything's still within a safe standard, they're learning. And then if they debrief it and you talk them through it, and then they say, well, what do you think? And you go back and you say, well, you did really well here, here, and here, and you might consider next time try this. It
And
was
are
a
we
positive.
and we're not paying extra for the time to train them because they're
Right.
already at work.
Right. And it was a positive outcome, right? It wasn't anything negative, wasn't in their face. It wasn't, you shouldn't have never done that. Only clinicians can do that, or only security officers should have done that. No, we were doing it together as a team. Um, so I'm like you. I can walk in sometimes, it's total chaos, and I go, yeah, I'm home. And I can walk in sometimes, and it's just not being controlled correctly. It's being, miscoached, mismanaged, and you just want to step in and take control of it and say, okay, follow me. This is a learning opportunity for you. Let's go do this. And it's that way with healthcare, no matter if you're in acute or long-term care, or if you're in specialty care. I don't care where you're at. first know who your customer is, right? Is it a clinician or is it the patient? When you walk into a situation, who's your customer? And
And you
and
can
I
identify that by looking at your behavioral anomalies. Who's agitated here? Who's really the agitated one? Because the chances of
Mhm.
it being me are really high. They're really high. If it's my fourth shift in a row, it's probably me. And we have to have the space to be empowered to say, hey, as security officer Dan, I noticed that you're really upset today. Like, this is not normal you. Like, can I get you some help? Like, what do you need? And I think that's where the chaplaincy and like other areas of the hospital are really beneficial. We call the chaplain for the code, we call security for the code, we call, what are they doing in that time? Are they able to
Mhm.
use their authority figure as a god type figure too to help mitigate the situation? And are they able to be there as a resource for the staff? And I think
Yeah.
there's something to be said for utilizing the current things that you have within this facility, but having someone to help you figure out how to utilize them properly is important.
Everybody had a role. I don't care what your job description is or job title is. Everybody's got a role in some event, right? And it may not be the one that you were hired for, but you have a role in it. And
Yeah.
again, some of the best um, support I ever had came from housekeeping, or came from the person delivering the medication supplies, the pharmacy tech or
Pharmacy
whatever,
tech.
because they just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time and they helped me out.
Farm
And yeah,
those EVS workers, they hear everything and they know everything. So if you're gonna have a
I bet.
violent family member, your EVS is like, nah, I mean, I knew
And
that.
they'll tell you how many
All
patients
that
or what.
crazy,
Yeah,
They're like, that guy crazy.
that, that guy's got 12 guests in the room. They can only have two, and now they just brought in all kinds of pizzas behind the nurse's back.
Yeah, but they're
Thank you.
hearing the conversations. A lot of them are
Right.
Spanish
Yeah.
speaking. If you have a high
Right.
Spanish speaking population and you don't have high Spanish speaking
Yeah.
staff,
Right.
they can be listening or observing for certain things that may be particular. Maybe they find a
Mhm.
weapon in the room while they're cleaning, you
They
know?
might. Again, they're the ones sometimes that hear the calls for help, right? The patient's been pushing the nurse call button for we don't know how long. To them, it seems like forever. It might have only been 30 seconds to a minute, but it doesn't stop me from peeking in and saying, "Can I help you?" Or the housekeeper by saying, "Can I help you? I just need my nurse, please. I don't feel okay. I'm going to see if I can help find them for you." Because
Mhm.
again, it makes it all come together as patient care, as quality patient outcome, right? Patient safety. Instead of them
Yeah.
trying to get up out of the bed because they really need to go to the bathroom and they can't without you, and yet it's not for me, but I got to find you. So
Right. Or on the safety side where they go in the room to clean the room and the patient's been violent and they get a hold of a mop or a broom
mhm,
or whatever.
mhm,
And now that situation has turned into a very dangerous situation when if
yeah,
they would recognize behavioral anomalies or there had been some sort of identification system on the door,
right.
yellow or orange, maybe they don't go in and clean that room right then, you
But
know?
there's so many things we can do in today, not only with again training, but with technology,
Yep.
and we make it so efficient. And then when you see or you hear of a bad outcome, and you step back and go, why didn't they have that? Why
Yeah.
didn't they do this? Well,
Right.
was it a standard industry practice? And if it's a standard industry practice and you're not on board, you're just waiting for the bad outcome, right?
Well,
And
and now these
so,
nurses are suing. People are suing their
well,
hospital because they're knowing that those click-through PowerPoints are just not enough training, or that they're finding out that the hospital next door has Everon or has a
mhm,
weapons detection system. And they're like, why don't we have that? So I
right.
think hospitals, in order to protect their brands and to hire nurses, retain nurses, same with security, we can't fix pay, we can't fix staffing, we can't fix systems issues, I can't fix insurance, I can't do any of that. All I can focus on is giving them the best tools that they can physically learn and
Hmm.
their own hands, to
Hmm.
be able to
Right.
protect themselves. I think
Yeah, the best integrated technology to do your job, right?
having the
You need the
budget for
best,
tech is really important.
but you have to have it. You need a nurse call system you can depend on. You need RTLS that you can depend on, right? You need a visitor management solution in the very beginning that may have already screened that someone's there as a repeat violent patient because you
Yeah.
flagged them,
Right.
or this person has a restraining order and shouldn't be going up to the mother baby unit. So, it's doing that needs assessment and starting from outside, working our way in, pulling in all the stakeholders, taking advantage of everybody's experience, everybody's opinion. And then at the end, the people that make the decisions have to make the right decisions for the right reasons.
As a CEO, I would feel like of a hospital, it's a very daunting task. Where do you suggest, like, if I'm developing a workplace violence program, or I just had a say for instance, you're the CEO at or you're talking to the CEO from Seattle Children's about everything that's happening. What would be your advice to like the first step? To me, it would be get everybody in one room together and let's have beginning the conversations about who we need in the room and what are the things that we need to start talking about.
Well, I think what you just said was, where do we begin? Let's step back now and debrief what just happened, because do we have practice and policy in place that we didn't follow, right? So that's shame on us. Or as we debrief this, is there something missing that was a key component that now we've identified? And so that's what I'd be looking for. Was it a training? Was it a technology? It's more of, you're the person in there. I always looked at my position as the conductor of the orchestra, right?
Right.
I need first string players in every chair to be the best. I just have the pleasure of being the one that's bringing it all together. So the CEO should be able to say, let's debrief this. Tell me what happened. Tell me what happened. What do you know? What do you know? What do you know? And sitting back there, just letting it all kind of resonate. And then going back and saying, don't we have policy? Don't we have procedure? Did we follow it? Do we need to amend it? Did we not follow it? Do we need to follow it? Do we need to retrain it? I think there's so much that goes on, and that's the daunting part of those debriefings, and then coming out with a needs assessment, and then coming in finally with, what did we now do to amend that, and then go back and do another assessment later
Yeah,
on.
and again and again. And
And
I think
again,
that's the
right.
exhausting part, that I think that is where technology is very useful,
Yes.
because now with
But even
AI,
look at our own home, look in our own life. I didn't mean to interrupt you. When you
no,
said technology, just because we have technology doesn't mean it's always working. And do we have technology now that is
better.
outdated because of
Yeah.
today's culture has moved, society has moved, right? And so some of the homes you walk in today are smart homes. And God, don't say the word Alexa when you walk in the house, because that's
I
my
was
favorite thing to
thinking
do.
that on.
That's my favorite thing to do, is walk in someone's home and go, "Hey Alexa," and if she answers, I go, "Play punk rock,"
Yeah.
because I mess with everything. And but think about, is what we have in place an enterprise solution that's going to grow with the organization, or does somebody just grab a shiny object 2 years ago and plugged it in, and now
Right.
it's not even working, or it's not going to work? So
And I
that's
think
part of that debrief we were talking about.
from a cost perspective, right? Because we've got a lot of, as you know, there's a lot of hospitals where security's budget is nil, right? They can barely operate with what they've got. So for those situations, I think it's not only finding ways in which we can incorporate different revenue streams or different channels of revenue. So whether you're going to do clinical education, can we build clinical education for the time that we're doing security education? Can we offer a CE? Can we do, different things as far as facility upgrades and include that with facility? If we're going to make structural upgrades and that's in our budget, are we going to consider that? Are we going to apply for grants and see if we can get some grants and do some research? And there's a lot of opportunities to look at different ways to fund it. But if you don't have funding, look at what you've got and contact those people and see where their upgrades are at, because there's a lot of companies now that have older tech solutions that are starting to upgrade their solutions too. So, there's a capability to see what you need, where the gaps are, and then fill those gaps in as you can. And I think there's a lot to be said for foundations. A lot of these
Oh
foundations
yeah.
and hospitals have money and they're willing to support. There's a lot to be said for,
Mhm.
if you can offer the training at a low cost, then you're developing other things, like the tech and like things like Everon that are coming in as a holistic solution. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of times security directors just don't have the time to go out and look for all this stuff, and they can meet with 20 different salespeople, but ultimately they're not clinicians. So I think that's what makes you beneficial, is that you have the experience as well as representing a company and can kind of speak to whether it's even a good fit for
Right.
that organization.
I appreciate the compliment, but at the end of the day, too, it's just even as a security director, yes, I was focused and busy on a lot of things, but that's where you build those relationships. That's where you join those organizations. That's where you built that network of, hey, I know now if I have a question regarding this, I'm going to call Mel because, hey, if I have a question regarding this, Mel's going to tell you to call David because David lived it, owned
Right.
it, survived it, moved on from it, right? And I can have a conversation. It doesn't mean that it's going to be that I'm going to be your solution, but I have no problem picking up the phone with someone and saying, sure, what's going on? Maybe there's something I can do for you, or I can direct you now to somebody who that's their solution, right? That's their
Right.
competency. And oh, you need training. Let me put you in touch with Mel. See that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
I think it behooves us as the professionals to constantly be the influencers, to constantly be the networkers. And even if you go to an event and you're just sitting in the audience, like when I sat through your presentation, um, listening to your lifelong experiences and your outcomes makes me better because I could either relate to something and you reinforced it, or I learned something that'll make me better.
Right.
And so I really, really encourage everyone, don't sit behind the desk. I know that I can look right here and there's probably 18 emails that hit since you and I have been talking. I'll get to that, right? My boss probably will hear me someday say, "I'll get to that," and it was one of his. But what I'm getting, what I'm getting at is you got to focus on what's important right now. And you have to be able to say, hey, I have resources, I have a network, I have colleagues. I can if every time I mention the name Martin Green, he owes me $5. Hey Martin, how you doing? That's 10. I want US, not Canadian. Um,
Martin would say the same thing about you though. He'd be like,
Oh,
David,
no, I know, but you understand that these are friendships that have turned into lifelong friendships
oh
that
yeah.
have turned into complete support. So if it's me reaching out to Paul Sarnisi, as you just mentioned, or it's me reaching out to Ben or Martin or Bonnie. I mean, I don't want to say names because I'll forget all these names, but none of us, because of our roles, whether we were end users, we're manufacturers, vendors, integrators, whatever you want to call us, take it personal if competition calls each other, right? Because it's David calling Mel and saying, Mel, I'm stuck in this. What would you do?
Yep.
And so I think that's a problem we have today. And I hope that as those in our positions keep hearing us say, quit being in a silo, step out of your comfort zone, step out of your silo. Because the ultimate goal is to provide a safe care environment for what? Staff, patients, and guests, right?
Yep.
So you can't do it as a one lone ranger. I don't care if you're male or female. I don't care if you're type A, type B personalities. I don't care what you can't do it by yourself.
Right.
So
I think that's really the benefit I found from the IAHSS and, people like Eric, people who are well known in the industry, who are always happy to help me, or always happy to give advice, or always happy to comment, or, just because I don't know what I don't know. But there are people that know less than me. And so it's kind of like I'm trying to get this information to those that need it and that can advocate for the solutions that they need. If every nurse knows about Evron, or every nurse knows about a weapons detection system or Byte Pro or whatever the thing is that we're talking about, then they can say to the organization, this happened, here's a practical solution to what
mhm.
to what we need.
Exactly. So again, anybody that listens to the podcast, have questions, please reach out, give me a holler.
Yeah, how do we
I mean,
get in touch with we need to get in touch with
well,
you, Dave.
I'm on LinkedIn like you are, so you can either hit me that way or you can hit me at my email at work is my name, David LaRose at it's still at adt.com.
Okay.
We're ever on, and or they can reach you and either way or vice versa. But I'm happy if I get those those communications come through IHSS. You can find us there, reach us that way. But please reach out because sometimes it's nice to put the email aside and help out a friend or a colleague or an up and coming star, right? Because it's always neat to get invited back somewhere where you were at one time and you left and you went back and saw where someone else took it. And it's
Yeah.
like, wow, I never thought of that. or wow, I put in this level and
Corbin
you
posted about that the other day. Was that him that posted that like 3 guys that he had trained had now are running
mhm.
organizations, and he was just so proud. And you know, I
Yep.
I used to feel that way as a nurse, but there's nobody left. So all the new all the nurses are gone, or I would say that. But yeah, you know, we've all flown the coop to do different things. But well, it was a
Right.
pleasure talking to you today and catching up with you today. And I look forward to getting together again soon, and
Absolutely.
hopefully we can do some exciting projects. We're about to publish a textbook. So
Okay.
I am going to have all the greatest people submit little interviews and little comments about things. So I would be honored if you would be in that. I think that if we can start with nursing education and provide the first workplace violence reduction textbook, and we can
Mhm.
cover not only techniques but the current state, and you know, maybe even technology solutions that are available. I can remember reading in my renal, you know, med surge textbook about dialysis machines, and then actually running one day. So I think it was
Mhm.
helpful, and I think that it'll do a lot in the space to empower those nurses and make them feel comfortable in dealing with what they're dealing with, and then help them to collaborate with security. If we can have a streamlined approach, if you're coming out of school and you know what a security officer does and what they don't, and how to talk
Mhm.
to them and how to deliver information quickly, then we've eliminated 50% of the issues that we're having.
Because they don't teach security in nursing school.
Right.
See, that's why. So, no, I'd be honored to help, and I would look forward to that. So please let me know when I can help you, and I would be honored. Um,
Awesome.
it's been
Awesome.
an
Well,
absolute pleasure. Thanks for taking me away from all the emails, and
don't
I
blame it
learned
on me
something.
because I didn't get your emails in.
I learn more every time I talk with you, so I really appreciate it.
You too. We'll talk again soon. Thank you so much.
All right, Mel, you take care. Happy
Take care.
holidays.
Bye.